Hey, welcome back to another episode of Detection at Scale. Today, I'm here with Elliot Colquhoun from Airwallex. Elliot is the VP of Information Security and IT. Elliot, great to have you on the show today.
Awesome. Thanks for inviting me. Super excited.
Yeah, maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about Airwallex and just briefly how you got into security and your background.
Yeah, of course. So Airwallex is a global financial infrastructure company. We're trying to build the future of global banking. This is across a few different layers. So we basically allow you to move money faster and cheaper than kind of the rest of the players in the market. We have a financial operating system that sits on top of it, which gives you the tools that you need to be able to run your business effectively. And we also have this very cool AI platform that kind of sits on top of that allows other companies to build their own fintechs on top of our technology. It's a very exciting business. We're Series F. We're moving ludicrously fast. We've got the kind of velocity of a startup, but the success of a bigger company, which is great.
And when did you start? How long have you been there?
Yeah, so I've been at Airwallex for about 5 years now. I think my path into security was pretty unusual, though. I did not ever intend to get into security. I remember taking a security paper at university and hating it. But yeah, I was at Palantir for a while before this. One day read the APT1 report from Mandiant and thought it was just the coolest thing in the world. So I just started learning, reading as much as I could, like doing OSCP, stuff like that. And then a few years later, here I am.
What was the experience at Palantir like? I think Palantir is one of those companies where when you've come from there, people are just naturally curious. Like, what
Mm.
did you learn? How, like, they have such a unique way of operating. And even I think your title is also very interesting for from that experience. So maybe you could tell us about that.
Yeah, we could do like a 6-hour podcast on Palantir. I think it was the best company in the world to join at that time as a young engineer, where the thing that they did better than anyone else is the ability to hire really great people and then dangerously empower them to go and find the hardest and most important problems that they could. And so I think being in that forward deployed engineer role, it gave you the opportunity to go and sit with people, listen to real problems that customers were facing, whether that's in like the oil and gas space all the way through to like national security and intelligence, see how they do their jobs, understand the importance of what you're doing, and then figure out ways to apply technology to help solve those problems. I think if you talk to pretty much anyone from Palantir, they all have one moment where they realized how impactful what they come to work to do every day could be. For me, that was, sitting in a police station when they had like an armed robbery and being able to sit next to a police officer and actually help them identify where their suspects might be hiding in this particular area and be able to apply technology to solve a crime that otherwise would go unnoticed. Um, you kind of go into that company and you come out a very different person, and I think it's a really interesting experience.
It sounds like it. You probably came out a lot more paranoid.
Yeah, the paranoia definitely, but I think the impact on the world is pretty undeniable.
So let's fast forward a little bit. You were there for 5-ish years, right?
Hmm.
And then you started Airwallex. T Take us through the mindset, the 0 to 1 journey that you had, because I think you're the first security leader there, right?
Yeah, so I joined Airwall. I've been working on Palantir's cybersecurity product for a few years before leaving, and I wanted to get back to my core of just writing code every day, being a little software engineer. And I just felt on day one that security was the place that I could have the most impact. And so I joined and had the opportunity to help build that team effectively from the ground up. We had one security person at the time, and what we needed to do is figure out how to build a security organization that would scale with a company that was already a unicorn and just rapidly exploding in terms of the number of people we were hiring, the rate of growth of the company, but doing that globally as well. I think the really interesting thing about trends for startups over the past kind of 3 to 4 years is that so many of them are so global first. And I felt like I got a really early insight into that being at Airwallex. What that meant is that we had to figure out what are the challenges that were being faced in each of these regions across things like compliance and like, your typical kind of like being a fintech in many different regions problems, but also learning to communicate with people across different cultures, being able to understand how they work, the kind of technology that they use, how they interact with systems, and so on. I think if we tried to apply like a one size fits all solution at that time and just try and consolidate as much as possible, we would have failed. But the path that we took instead, which I think is really interesting, is building more tailored understanding of how each of the different people across our organization work each day.
And then where did that lead to?
So what it meant is that we would actually spend a lot of time sitting with different employees across different regions. So for our employees in the EU, we would have to, when we're rolling out new controls, consider what they actually cared about and how we would engage with them. When we rolled out a VPN and we had TLS decryption enabled, we spent time explaining to them how this actually worked, talking through the data privacy considerations that we had already thought about, taking on their feedback, and making sure that they felt heard. That concept of rolling out a VPN and like employee privacy and stuff like that was nowhere near as big a deal in somewhere like Australia, where it was kind of just run of the mill business as usual for them. But also, when we started seeing attacks targeting specific regions and using specific tactics, we would have to communicate with those regions. To give an example of this, communication platforms are very different globally. In the US, we're very heavy on iMessage. In Southeast Asia, WhatsApp is just enormous. In parts of Asia, you've also got things like WeChat and WeCom. Even stuff like Facebook Messenger in New Zealand is just absolutely huge. And learning how each of these platforms use, how these users use them, how that can be a vehicle for delivering malware to your users, that really informs how you build a tailored security program for all of your employees.
So how did you even approach that? How do you prioritize? Is it really just based on risk and the profile? Like, take us through the thought process of that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is just risk-based at the end of the day. We have to optimize on what our most popular systems are, but you can imagine one aspect that we would look at is what systems people are actually using, right? If we have a look at what software is installed across our fleet, that gives us a good sense of how many people, running WhatsApp on their work laptops for their personal use. We obviously have a bunch of controls around that and monitoring, but we can compare that to something like WeChat or to Facebook Messenger or to any of the other kind of like modern chat apps and understand what is going to be the most effective area that we can deploy new controls. It's also based on learning, right? Like, I think when you start to learn more about how people use each of these applications in different places, that gives you a better sense of where you need to deploy the controls. In the US, people don't typically use iMessage for business use anywhere near as much as something like Southeast Asia. The way that your salespeople communicate with your customers is completely different region to region.
And I assume there's just a crazy high amount of regulatory that goes into this too, and that probably is tailored to the country and the region, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating. The way I like to think about regulations is that every regulator is trying, right? They all want to have the right set of controls in place and require them of all of their regulated entities so that they can have some minimum like level of risk or minimum level of controls that are applied across their industry. We spend a lot of time navigating those rather than trying to meet them. So we have really good foundational security, right? We spent a long, long time just building the kind of basic building blocks of our security program. And what this meant is that when we come across new regulations, we can meet them very easily, but we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how we communicate in a way that our regulators will understand a lot of our controls. I think the downside of building super modern security programs is that what you do looks different to a bank that's been around for 200 years, right? There's a lot of value in just being able to communicate in a way that feels like a regulator will understand it without slowing down your team.
It's going to be a lot of interesting conversations in the next few years with LLMs.
Yeah, I think that'll be really fascinating. But I mean, I think the only solution there is to actually work with your regulators, right? And for your security team to adopt and leverage AI. I just don't think that you can effectively secure the use of AI if you have a bunch of people who are like terrified of it and too scared of the security considerations to actually use it themselves in a real production setting.
Where have you seen a lot of luck in applying AI in a real production setting?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the unique things about Airwallex's security program is that because we have like very good foundational controls that kind of handle the typical parts of a security program across detection and response, across like threat hunting, that kind of thing. Uh, we basically take 30% of our team each year and we throw them at things that may not work out. But if they do, would completely revolutionize the way that we do security at Airwallex. We refer to these as our big bets. And these are things that like we just think will work. One of those is building an AI platform that powers every security use case that we have today. And so what this means is figuring out how do we build your typical kind of like data platform that we've seen a lot in the past in the security industry, right? As like security teams get more data driven. And then figure out how do you empower every additional use case? So how do you build a consistent set of documents and information that you can use for RAG against like all of your GRC, like questionnaire filling out use cases. But you can also use the same underlying data, assuming that it's well modeled, to do things like automatically resolve alerts or to suggest actions that are taken. And because we're using AI to do this rather than like your kind of traditional monitoring approach of having more traditional rules, it allows us to actually build Airwallex specific response plans. To give an example of this, some alert triggers, it's on some, I don't know, pod somewhere in our GCP environment. Our LLM that we have is able to go and have a look at every ticket in history, all of our Confluence documentation, all of the Jira tickets for every other team, and from there come up with an opinion of what that asset actually is, and then contextualize the actual alert that we're seeing, right? If it's like some particular command being executed, we're able to say, like, has this been run in the past? Is the service used for connecting to this other partner? Does that typically have like latency issues? Is it just an engineer who is debugging some really specific common network issue that you only know if you've been at that company long enough and you've seen that activity before? That ability to like hyper contextualize your alerts, I think has been super powerful for us.
And when you're creating these systems, this is super cool, by the way. When you're creating this, are you collaborating with other sort of AI engineers in the company, or is it all contained within security?
Yeah, it's also a very good question. We're a pretty autonomous team, I think to a fault, actually. There's a lot of benefit to working with more teams across the business. We're a very small team relative to the size of the company. We have 9 security engineers, including myself, for an 1,800 person business. So 0.5% of the company at Series F, which is pretty unheard of. The only way we can do that is by hiring exceptionally talented people. And we try and hire people that have the skill set that we need, not just for today, but will be able to help build the products and tools that we need internally for something that's like 5 years in the future. And so talking with pretty much half of the team, they'll all tell you the same thing, which is that in the future, they're all off to go and start their own AI-based cybersecurity companies, right? One guy has a little startup on the side already. And I think that builder entrepreneur mindset and profile allows us to not just see product or problems within the business and solve them in a really traditional way, but apply first principles thinking, understand what is the like problem that we're actually trying to solve, what are all of the like individual components, how can we solve those by parts, and make sure that whatever we build is going to scale for the next 5 to 10 years. On top of that, we also make sure that when we hire someone in security, they have a very unique background. I think one of the trends that I've started to notice over the past few years is that security engineers that have a pure security background, I think are actually starting to get outpaced by their peers that are moving in from software engineering, even
Hmm.
from IT, from DevOps. I think that's just the ability to go deeper and go toe to toe and iterate more collaboratively with people in other parts of the business.
Super interesting. Going back to the platform a little bit. So you said it's a shared AI service that everyone in security uses. Is this related at all to some things developing in MCP? Can you talk us through that, or is it all sort of bespoke internal LLMs? Like, is there an ecosystem sort of plugin in here that you're utilizing that others can sort of learn from, or like talk about that for a sec?
Yeah, there's a little bit of secret sauce that we'll hold close, but like any good product, we're not going to reveal all the secrets. So effectively, we leverage best-in-class LLMs at the core, and we've actually found that foundational models are like good enough to do a lot of work on our behalf. So we basically start with our large language model and then we enrich it with a bunch of other data sources. So you look in a lot of startups in this space, ingesting like Jira tickets as history to be able to then reference what has happened in the past. We do that kind of thing. We also do things like leverage other tools within our environment. So we leverage the ability to search Slack, to search Glean, to search Confluence, to like actually perform live Jira searches, that kind of thing to get additional contextual information. And at the moment, we're looking at starting to build the integration with MCP servers and have those hooked up to other tools that we have. So the thing that's currently in flight is the ability for our large language model that's kind of in the detection and response space to be able to run its own Splunk searches and then reason about the results that it sees and then kind of iterate from there. It's been super promising so far, just without doing additional searches, just with like the context on a particular ticket. I think it's right something like 70% of the time, which is pretty good considering it has very limited information. Yeah, I think some of the things that are really unusual or unintuitive about building stuff like that is that you have to make sure that the data that you have is really good and you have to actually train your engineers to contribute data in a way that empowers your future AI use cases.
So when you think about the future of tooling in general, do you think enterprise tools are going to be consumed in this way in the future, where you have enterprises creating these bespoke agents effectively, and then the vendors are really providing unique data, unique capabilities for that data. Like, how do you see that playing out?
I think I see the need for AI platforms to be able to provide the context of a business. And then you have a bunch of surrounding tooling that is able to be controlled by whatever that like enterprise agent is. So to give an example of this, I don't think that we're going to get to a world where big data tooling, like your Panther or Snowflake or whatever, is being replaced by just like a large language model, right? Like I think that's just completely infeasible. You're not going to have some large LLM replace CrowdStrike. I also think that that's just completely unrealistic. But the idea of having an agent which is really true to your business, that understands your business's context, the things that are important to you and not important to you, and able to then control other tools, is what the future looks like. And what we're really doing when you think about it is just replicating the skill set of a really high performing security engineer. And when you look at that path, is they come in, they go and talk to a whole bunch of people, they learn a ton about the business, they dig into code bases, they dig into architecture, and then from there they're able to reason more effectively about alerts that come in, about RFCs that they read, PIDs that they review, questionnaires that they're filling out, and provide a better outcome.
And when you think about the level of intelligence that has to get encoded into those agents, you talked about some of the sources, but I'm curious if there's just best practices that you've learned where you're saying, okay, this organizational data is actually very important to have in your
Mm.
internal agent. Like, do you have those learnings that you can share, or is that secret sauce?
No, the secret sauce we haven't even covered yet. I think the thing that has been most impactful for us is uh, setting up your like human generated content to support your AI generated use cases in the future. So making sure that when you have a security engineer that's performing incident response, they're not just dropping little like bullet points into Slack, but actually being able to explain their reasoning. What we've started doing now is actually collecting really good examples of where our large language model has been able to generate really good responses to like questions as an example, and then we're feeding those back in through like multi-shot as an example. That kind of continuous refinement and iteration, I think, is really important. Yeah. This is also a really big bet for us, right? When you think about any kind of big bet, whether it's like, building a new product, the kind of crazy stuff that we do in security, starting a company, whatever, you need to be able to iterate really quickly. One of the things that we do is every week we have this AI review session. We go through what the latest like usability scores are that we have from our security engineers, if it's actually useful or not. And then we just trial new changes. We set up A/B testing really early. We made sure that we structure data in like very specific ways and that we'd continue iterating and just feeding into the model whatever would be best for it to be able to generate decisions. So I think making sure that you have really good data that is set up in a way that a large language model can understand it and being able to iterate really quickly are the keys.
And have you stayed predominantly in a single sort of class of frontier models? You mentioned GCP, so I'm assuming you're in Gemini, or have you sort of mixed and matched frontier models in a way
Mm.
based on the use case?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We've used kind of whatever is best in class for different purposes for like the past year and a half now. So early on, we were using a Gemini and using its vector DB store. We're still using that in parts today. We use O1 for a lot of stuff at the moment as well. The way that we built our
Hmm.
system though is it's very easy to like plug and play different models, and then from there, because we do A/B testing, we can very easily assess what is best. And it really depends on the use case as well. What I think is fascinating is to build everything that we're building, we use a lot of Claude. And then for any kind of deeper analysis, we typically use Gemini. But for the actual kind of like initial assessment, we're using O1 a lot. So I think there's like knowledge of what actually works best for each use case is really important too.
Wow, that's super, super interesting. You're really mixing and matching.
Yeah, and I think we'll just continue doing that indefinitely. I think what would be really fun is building an LLM for security, just like the general purpose, like little InfoSec bot. uh, you need a lot of data. I don't think we're quite at that scale, unfortunately, but I think it would be really impactful for the industry.
What would you want to make unique about that data set? Because I feel like security, I don't know, it's specific, but also very general. You need
Mm,
a lot of context to understand what's happening.
mm,
So how would you think about like what types of things would you think it would be important to label
mm.
necessarily?
I think it's really focused on what you want that like model to actually be able to do and to kind of personify it a little bit, who you want that model to be. Um, if you just Google what are the biggest risk-facing businesses, you're going to get an answer that is probably not going to be very good. It's going to cover a bunch of stuff that your organization might care about and it might not care about. But I think if you look at the entire security industry, you can start to see these archetypes of security engineers, of security personnel who think about problems in certain ways. And so I think in my ideal world, I would just collect like all of the security data from everyone, right? In some obviously very secure, very compliant manner. But I would start to build LLMs around like the different kinds of businesses that you need to protect. And so you can have a large language model that understands how banks operate. And you have a large language model that understands how modern companies operate. And you have ones that work for companies that are Series A and it's really scrappy and they just need to survive and generate revenue and like, they're on their own all the way up to we have a, like 1,000-person security team and it's more about optimization and like iterative work. Yeah, I think the long term of large language models kind of has to be composition based rather than want to do them all, I think.
Well, I think you're certainly ahead of the pack when it comes to building systems like this. And it's been really interesting to talk with various folks and just kind of understand how they're approaching it because there's situations where folks are just using whatever a vendor will give
Mm.
them and they're consuming it within that product. But I feel like that's going to have a scaling limit very soon because if you think of every single security tool that exists, you're
Mm.
not going to be using a chat that's limited to the context of just that tool.
Mm.
And the thing I'm really excited about with MCP is just the fact that you can start to bring all that context into one particular flow. And that's exactly,
Mm.
it sounds like how you're doing it, except you're also able to reach into your proprietary internal data sets
Mhm.
and bring that in as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see all of this play out and
Mm.
have these agents working alongside your teams and having agents creating new agents and all these really, really cool developments that are happening. I guess when it comes to AI, like what are some of the next things that you're all looking at from an iteration perspective? Like what's top of mind right now? What problems are you trying to solve that you can share?
I think the detection and response one is like a really big one for us. The way we built our detection and response program was very focused on reducing like time spent on bullshit, basically. Our false positive rate is like 8%. We have like quite a high rate of finding things that are benign. And what we're trying to do is figure out how do we continuously refine our like fleet of detection strategies so that they're consistently ignoring and like not worrying about benign stuff. That false positive rate stays really low, and the true positive rate we actually want to increase over time. That's a really hard problem. You have to have a large language model that understands your environment, understands your historical alerts, understands trends, right? It needs to be able to look at a graph of what your false positive, true positive, benign rates over time look like, and then be able to actually understand and iterate on your actual detection strategies, right? Like if these are written using some MapReduce function, like you need a large language model that's really good at being able to do MapReduce and understand how to write PySpark as an example. Maybe it needs to be able to write SPL, whatever. So I think that's like a really hard and really impactful part of the AI work we're doing. Others is to build a bot that basically answers questionnaires from partners, from customers, from regulators. There's a lot of companies in this space. It's pretty crowded, and LLMs should naturally work really well in this space, but it's very high risk. You think about it, right? Like we're very, very heavily regulated industry, and you never want to hallucinate to your regulators, right? I think if a human did that, they would get fired instantly. If an LLM does it, it's equally bad. And so I think we are still trying to figure out how do you go from generating answers to questions and being able to kind of directly respond to regulators in a high confidence way versus the current approach, which is generate, have someone read and review, have them correct it, and then ship it to a regulator. Uh, One of the future problems that I'm also thinking about is when you start to have AI replace all of these processes and all of these systems, the institutional knowledge that you typically get with these people, things like how do you explain your business to a regulator, that just ceases to exist. So is the future where your large language model directly communicates to your regulators? Do they get on Zoom calls with them and answer questions, or are they just feeding information to a human who then responds? Yeah, I think it's a really hard and really interesting problem.
It's going to be a very mind-blowing next no, I mean, I'm not even going to say 5 years. It's going to be the next
5 months.
mind-blowing 1 year. I mean, yeah, 1 month. You never know, right? There's
Mm.
the pace of change here is so special and we're all just trying to wrap our minds around it. So I do appreciate you sharing the depth of context here. I think folks will get a lot of value out of what you said and just understanding how to really think about building a team in 2025. It really seems like this is where things are going, where the SOC is becoming agentic,
Mm.
and that's literally the title of a blog I put out like a week ago. It's like the agentic SOC. Like, how should we be thinking about all these technologies, A to A, MCP, putting it all together? How do we augment our team around these things? Even what you just said around institutional knowledge, how do we sort of preserve that in the most important ways that are complementary to AI models? So yeah, it's all very, very, very interesting stuff.
I'm sure you found the same thing, but the thing that's so fascinating is how fast you can iterate, right? Like AI kind of owning the product development ecosystem benefits security engineering, SecOps teams like tremendously. We basically set up a large language model just to do some basic geo enrichment in like 2 weeks. And the thing that I actually was really surprised and delighted by, the kind of serendipity along the way, is that uh, it not only made our team more efficient, which is great, but it also taught our team how to think about AI better. In the same way that your security engineers, your team, they dive deep with the business to understand how products work, how services are built. Using AI actually makes them better at defending and securing AI. It's really unintuitive, but it's been really effective for us.
I think that makes total sense because everyone's always a little skeptical, confused,
Mm,
etc. I mean, it's even the same reason I think people haven't tried it because they don't understand it. But once you do understand it
mm,
and you see its results, you're like, oh my God, this is unbelievable.
mm, yeah.
And that was the feeling I had the other day. Like I've been really going deep into the coding agents. So Codex and Claude Code and just trying to understand how we can harness this for things like rule creation.
Mm,
And I gave someone a demo earlier on MCP. And I said, look, you can use natural language and it can go pull all this context together. And as the more you understand around the interaction with the models and the interaction with the tools, the better your responses will be. It's like garbage in, garbage out. And that's always
mhm.
been a principle in general with life, right? Like can't really create something great from something that isn't. And LLMs is just another application of that. So the thing I find hilarious is the best communicators will be the most effective with AI because it's really clarity of articulation.
Mm,
And it probably makes you a better manager as well. If you're saying, okay, I really need you to go do this thing, and this is the goal, and this is how you should be thinking about it.
mm.
And these are the types of things I expect, but you're not exactly prescriptive on how they'll get there. So I always find that's like an interesting, funny comparison.
Yeah, for sure. I hope that we manage to keep the quirkiness of security engineering in the age of AI as well. I think when I looked at our like Slack metrics recently, our emoji use by our security team is like 500x more than any other team in the company. And I think the when you start replacing people with large language models and they're not posting cat emojis every third word, I think it'll be a very sad time.
It just needs to be a setting. It's like an interstellar, like the
Mm.
sarcasm meter. It's like at 80%, turns it down to 50, it gets too annoying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can't do that with security engineers, unfortunately.
Okay, so to wrap things up, would love to hear your three pieces of advice for other security leaders listening in. You had a really interesting career, so would love to just end the episode with this. So
Yeah, I think I'll caveat all of this with a hefty handful of salt, in that I've had like a very non-traditional path into security. I have like a huge amount of admiration for people that have been fortunate enough to do it for their entire lives. But I think the things that have provided me the most value so far is the fact that I came from a background that wasn't security. I think coming from a software engineering background allowed me to apply a like product engineering mindset to how I think about security. I don't see functions that need to be built. I don't see like a vulnerability program that needs to be stood up. I see like a problem that needs to be solved through like an internal product. And that lens, I think, has helped me a lot. The second one, I think, is that to be successful in security, like at every layer, you need to be able to go deep. I think the most successful security leaders, as well as security engineers, everyone all across the entire InfoSec org, has to be T-shaped. I think if you can prove that you can go deep on something, if you can apply first principles thinking, if you can learn something to incredible detail that's transferable across the business, and it just drastically increases the ability to collaborate with others and also deliver like actual impact and security, which is hard enough. Uh, I think lastly, my personal one is just to try and stay positive. I think this is a industry, a career that you lose at the end of the day, right? There are no winners in security. It's just how bad it will be one day. And I think the resounding sense of positivity and reminding yourself that you are making progress and you are moving the needle, not having a bad day is the same thing as a good day. I think that's really important.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elliot. And anything to plug? Are you guys hiring, looking for more folks?
Yeah, we're always hiring. If you want to build interesting, cool AI stuff internally, if you want to work on super hard problems with a very lean team, reach out. Our careers page is airwallex.com/careers.
Awesome. And I'll plug our Substack, detectionatscale.com. You can find all the old blog posts, things about AI, a lot of the stuff that Elliot was talking about, all the old shows, things like that. And our podcast is put on by Panther, the company I founded a long time ago, 2018. So I've learned more about that, panther.com. And yeah, thank you so much, Elliot. It was amazing chatting with you. I'm very, very inspired. I'm going to go out and probably get some fresh air and just think about all the things that you taught us today on this episode. So thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.